You finally reached the dream salary, the one you thought would solve everything. But instead of feeling free, you feel trapped. The house is nicer, the car is newer, yet you're still checking your bank account before every luxury purchase. Why does earning more feel like running faster on a treadmill that never stops? Most people think a high salary is the exit ramp from financial stress. In reality, for the middle class, it's often just a more decorated prison cell. It's called lifestyle creep, but it's much more dangerous than just buying a nicer coffee. It's a psychological cage that keeps you working a job you might hate, just to fund a life you don't even have time to enjoy. Today, I'm going to break down the 3 invisible bars of this financial prison and, more importantly, how to pick the lock before you waste your best earning years. If you're earning a good income but still feel like you're one paycheck away from a crisis, you're in the right place. My name is Ely, and I spend way too much time thinking about how people in the US experience money psychologically. If you're someone who earns a normal income, maybe even more than you used to, but still doesn't feel financially secure, hit subscribe and give this video a thumbs up. It helps more than you'd think, and it tells me you want more of this kind of breakdown instead of another generic budgeting checklist. Let's start with the math, because the math is the part nobody argues with. The Bureau of Labor Statistics has tracked something strange for years now. Real wages, meaning income adjusted for inflation, have crept upward for a lot of workers since the pandemic. On paper, that's good news. People are earning more dollars than they used to. But the Federal Reserve's own survey of household economics and decision-making has found that a huge share of adults, even ones making what used to be considered a comfortable income, say they couldn't cover a $400 emergency expense without borrowing or selling something. Read that again. Comfortable income can't cover $400. That's not a coincidence. That's a pattern. And patterns have explanations. Here's the thing. Salary is not the same as security. You can increase one without increasing the other, and most people never realize this until they're standing in the middle of it, confused about why a 40% raise didn't make them feel 40% less anxious. Let's use a real number. Say you were making $50,000 a year. You're stressed, you're budgeting carefully, you're driving an older car, and you tell yourself things will feel different once you're making $75,000. So you grind, you get the promotion, and now you're at $75,000. For about 2 months, it feels incredible. Then something happens. The math doesn't lie, but your behavior quietly rewrites the math without telling you. This is where it gets interesting. The moment your income rises, your brain doesn't ask, "How do I bank this extra money?" It asks, "What does someone who earns this much deserve?" That single question is the first invisible bar of the prison. Psychologists call this identity-based spending. Your spending isn't actually tracking your needs anymore. It's tracking the identity you believe your income now represents. You don't move from a 1-bedroom apartment to a 2-bedroom because you need the space. You move because a person earning $75,000, in your mind, doesn't live in a place with secondhand furniture and a mattress on the floor. Now you might be thinking, that's just normal upgrading. Everyone does that when they earn more. And you're right, everyone does. That's exactly the problem. It's so normalized that almost nobody questions it. The car payment goes from $280 a month to $520. The apartment goes from $1,200 to $1,900. Dinners out, which used to be a once-a-month treat, become a twice-a-week default because you're tired and you've earned it. None of these decisions feel reckless in the moment. Each one feels reasonable, even responsible. But stack them together, and the raise that was supposed to create breathing room has been fully absorbed before it even touched a savings account. Here's what most people don't realize. Lifestyle creep doesn't usually happen through one big decision. It happens through dozens of small ones that each feel justified on their own. Nobody sits down and says, "I am going to spend exactly as much as I earn so that I remain financially fragile forever." Instead, it's the result of 20 separate small upgrades, each one logical in isolation, that together rebuild the exact same financial pressure you had before, just with nicer wallpaper. Let's talk about the second bar of the prison. And this one is sneakier because it doesn't even feel like spending. It's comparison. The American Psychological Association has published research for years on financial stress, and one consistent finding keeps showing up. Stress isn't driven primarily by how much money someone has. It's driven by the gap between what they have and what they believe they should have. That belief is built almost entirely by comparison, And comparison in the United States right now is not measured against your neighbor's actual finances. It's measured against a curated highlight reel scrolling past your thumb for 2 hours a day. Think about what that does to your nervous system. You earn $90,000 a year, which by almost any historical or global standard is a genuinely strong income. But your reference point isn't history or the rest of the world. Your reference point is a feed full of new kitchens, vacation photos, and home purchases from people who are either earning far more than you, going into debt to look like they are, or both, and you have no way of knowing which. Here's the trap. Your brain doesn't process that distinction. It just registers, everyone else seems to be doing better than me, and that registers as a threat. Real, physical, cortisol-releasing stress, the same stress response your ancestors had when resources were actually scarce, except now it's triggered by a stranger's countertop. This is where it gets uncomfortable, because the math says you should feel secure, but the comparison loop overrides the math every single time. You can have a fully funded emergency fund and still feel poor, simply because the input you're comparing yourself against is unrealistic and constant. Now you might be thinking, I know social media is curated, that's not new information. And you're right, you know it intellectually. But knowing something intellectually and feeling its effect are two completely different processes. You can know a magic trick is fake and still flinch when the card disappears. Comparison works the same way on your wallet. Let's bring in the third bar, and this is the one that quietly does the most damage over time, because it's invisible even to the person experiencing it. It's the safety illusion, and it's the reason a higher salary can make you feel more trapped instead of less. When your expenses rise to match your income, what you've actually done is raise your monthly break-even point. That sounds technical, so let's translate it into a metaphor. Imagine your finances as a tightrope. At $50,000 a year with modest expenses, you might be walking that rope 2 feet off the ground. If you slip, you stumble. It's annoying, but you're fine. Now imagine you raise your income to $90,000, but your expenses rise right alongside it. The bigger apartment, the newer car, the subscriptions, the dinners. You haven't gotten off the tightrope. You've just raised it to 20 feet in the air. The income is higher, sure, but a slip now is catastrophic instead of annoying. One layoff, one medical bill, one slow month for a freelance client, and the entire structure you built doesn't bend, it breaks. This is why so many people earning what looks, on paper, like a genuinely good salary still describe themselves as one paycheck away from disaster. They're not wrong. They've built a life with no slack in it, and slack, not income, is what actually creates the feeling of safety. The Federal Reserve data backs this up consistently. It's not the bottom earners alone who report feeling financially fragile. A meaningful percentage of people earning 6 figures report the exact same fragility, because fragility isn't about the size of the number coming in, it's about the size of the gap between what comes in and what's already spoken for before the month even starts. Now here's where this gets genuinely strange. And it's the part most financial content skips entirely, because it's psychological rather than mathematical. Once your lifestyle expands to consume your income, that expanded lifestyle becomes self-reinforcing. You start to need the higher salary just to maintain a life you didn't actually need in the first place. That's the third bar locking into place. It's not just that you spend more. It's that quitting a stressful job, negotiating differently, or taking a career risk now feels impossible, because your fixed costs have grown to require every dollar of your current income. The job stops being a choice and starts being a life support system. That's the prison, not poverty, obligation. So here's what most people get wrong when they try to fix this. They assume the solution is just spend less, save more, classic advice, technically true, completely useless on its own, because it ignores the psychological mechanism driving the behavior in the first place. Telling someone with identity-based spending habits to simply spend less is like telling someone with a fear of flying to simply not be afraid. The instruction is correct. It does nothing because it doesn't address why the behavior exists. Here's what actually works, and it starts with something almost nobody does, which is naming your number before your income changes, not after. Before a raise, before a new job offer, before a bonus. Decide in writing what percentage of any new income is automatically protected, meaning it never enters your spending decisions at all. Many financial researchers point to something close to 50% of any raise being redirected immediately, before it ever touches your checking account, into savings or debt payoff. Not because 50% is a magic number, but because deciding in advance removes the moment of temptation entirely. You can't talk yourself into spending money you've already moved somewhere else. The second action step directly targets the comparison trap, and it's uncomfortable but effective. Audit who you're actually comparing your financial life to, specifically. Not in the abstract, specifically. Most people, if they sat down and thought honestly about it, would realize the lifestyle they're chasing belongs to people whose actual financial situation they know almost nothing about. You don't know their debt. You don't know their family help. You don't know their hours. Comparing your full financial picture, including your stress and your sleep, to someone else's edited highlight reel isn't comparison, it's distortion. The fix isn't to stop comparing entirely. Humans are wired to do that. The fix is to deliberately choose a more honest comparison point, like your own finances 6 months ago, where you actually have the full picture. The third action step is about rebuilding slack on purpose, and this is where the tightrope metaphor comes back. Before adding a single new fixed expense, even a justified one, ask one question. Does this lower my tightrope or raise it? A new car payment raises it. An extra month of emergency fund lowers it. This isn't about never upgrading your life. That's not realistic, and honestly, it's not even healthy advice. It's about making sure every upgrade is a conscious trade you chose, rather than an automatic absorption of every dollar your income produces. So here's the surprising realization underneath all of this. The goal was never actually to earn more money. That's the trap inside the trap. The real goal was always to widen the gap between what you earn and what you need, and you can widen that gap from either direction. You can chase income upward forever, which is exhausting and has no finish line, because there's always a bigger house, a newer car, a more impressive number to compare yourself against. Or you can hold your needs steady while your income grows, which is the only version of this that actually produces the feeling people are chasing in the first place, which was never really about the money. It was about the absence of fear. That's the calm part most people skip past too quickly. You're not actually trying to get rich. You're trying to stop checking your bank account with a knot in your stomach before a normal purchase. You're trying to take a sick day without doing math first. That feeling doesn't come from a bigger number on a pay stub. It comes from the gap, the space between income and obligation, and that gap is something you can start building today with the income you already have, without waiting for a raise that might just get absorbed the same way the last one did. If this is the first time you've heard your financial stress described this way, instead of just being handed another spreadsheet, that's exactly why I make these videos. Subscribe if you want more breakdowns like this one. And let me know in the comments what your number was, the income you thought would finally make you feel secure, and whether it actually did. I read those, and honestly, the answers are usually the same story wearing a different dollar amount. I'm Ely, and I'll see you in the next one.